Welcome to I Am My Sister's Keeper and She Is Mine,
a podcast where two sisters
who are not mental health professionals
talk about mental illness from our perspectives.
Just two sisters living with mental illness and loving each other through. Before we start today's episode, we want to throw in a trigger warning because we will again be speaking about abuse and domestic violence. So last week we heard a condensed version of Randy's experience growing up in a traumatic household. And now it's time for my perspective from my experience as someone 9 years younger than Randy was. So totally different situation, yet the same situation. Mm-hmm. So my first memory, as I mentioned on the last episode, was Larry beating the shit out of our mother. Mm-hmm. So my memories of abuse with Larry were actually after we moved out. Oh. And when I had to visit him.
Yeah.
So it was a different kind of hell because, number one, I saw him every weekend or every other weekend or whatever it was mandated to me. But I was also kind of on my own.
On your own, yeah. Mommy wasn't there. We weren't there.
Right. So the brothers were there. Mm-hmm. And I was very close with the middle brother. I adored him. Mm-hmm. So Larry, my biological father, only physically hit me once.
Right.
And I hate to say only because, you shouldn't hit a kid. And that was because I wanted to go home. I don't even know that I wanted to go home, but I wanted to call Mommy. Uh-huh. And he wasn't having that.
Right.
But my memories are more of, number one, being stalked and followed.
Right.
Because he was everywhere. Everywhere.
It was so scary.
It was, because there was just, you're never safe.
Never.
And he made so many threats, for me, and this is why I always felt like my borderline personality disorder came from the fear of losing Mommy.
Yeah.
Because he always threatened to take me away.
He instilled that in you.
Yeah. And then he would show up at school, and charming man, had everybody snowed, all the teachers, did. Oh, woe is him, the mother's a bitch, and won't let her
and
kids,
everyone believed him.
And everybody. And not even just at school. I mean, I don't even know how many times we were in court, and the judges and the attorneys all believed him. I was in court-mandated therapy. And it wasn't even, here's the thing, it wasn't therapy.
Right.
It was...
like a mediator or something?
It was, let's see why, if this kid really doesn't want to see their parent, who's abusing them, they're talking shit about each other, and Mommy I don't remember her saying anything bad about him.
Yeah.
She didn't have to.
Right. Because
I was living it.
Yeah.
Like, I knew who he was. Mm-hmm. And I was always old. Yeah.
You were an old...
I feel like because I always remember I wanted to take care of Mommy. Mm-hmm. Another memory I have, and I must have been, I was young when Mommy had her hysterectomy. Yeah. But I remember wanting to take care of her.
How old was Mommy?
She was 26 when she had me.
So 28 maybe?
So I don't know how I remember that. But I do, I remember, I remember when she was sick or anything, or maybe she was high. I don't really remember, but I would bring her toast and jelly. Mm-hmm. I loved her so much.
I know you did.
And, I'd snuggle with her in the mornings. Mm-hmm. Dad would go to work and I'd hop into Mommy's bed. She was my safe. Yeah. And she couldn't save me. She tried. I know it's so weird because I can see it as an outsider. Yeah. And I can look back and see it as an adult outsider. Mm-hmm. Like I was an adult. And I remember saying, nobody's listening to me. Mm. At some point I finally got a guardian at Lidum so that I had my person. But still, I'm pretty sure he had everybody on the payroll. Oh, yeah. Despite him saying he had no money and didn't pay child support. Right. But the one therapist that I went to, she always women. He always made sure it was a woman. So yeah, I specifically remember this one woman therapist. And by this time I was probably 9-ish. And I was done being quiet. Nobody listened to me. And Mommy would have to force me to go visit him. And I could tell that was torture on her. Yes. It just was horrible. But this one woman therapist is telling me how I need to respect my father and all the things. And I'm like, you don't know who he is. And then the middle brother came into therapy, into this session once. And he actually had the balls to say, yeah, he was a little bit rough, but he was a good father. This coming from the kid who had to call him boss. That was the required name.
Wow.
And this coming from the kid who took my beatings, because Larry's form of abuse with me physically was if I did something wrong, he would beat the shit out of him.
Oh my God.
And he would kick him with his steel toe boots.
Yep.
Like, it just... So for me, it was not physical abuse. It was severe mental, emotional, and some sexual abuse from all of them. He would show up at my school.
From all of them?
The brothers.
Okay. And the father?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and I have to get into how I figured that out one day. It's another episode. I figured that out in high school.
Figured what out?
Remembered the sexual abuse.
Oh, my.
Because I had blocked that out.
Uh-huh.
But, so I would go visit him every weekend or every other weekend. And by the time you guys had moved out, he had half the house locked down.
Oh.
Like, it literally deadbolts on the locks. You couldn't go into certain rooms.
Wow.
It was weird. And he, again, had all of the war paraphernalia.
It sounds like a Criminal Mind episode.
Totally. And that's what, like, he
has that vibe.
Yeah. I mean, he was horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. I can't even say human being.
Yeah.
And, and what the funny thing is that, Mommy always used to say you have to forgive him because he was a sick man.
Yeah.
And I will acknowledge that. I acknowledge that he had generational trauma from being born during the Holocaust or conceived during the Holocaust. I will acknowledge that I have no idea how his parents were. I remember his mother calling me and telling me if I didn't go to visitation, she was writing me out of the will. I, 8 years old, what the fuck do I care?
Right.
But I also acknowledge the fact that he had a choice at some point in his 70-something years to change.
Yeah.
And he didn't.
Right.
So he could have made a different choice.
He could have.
He could have gone on definitely mentally ill in some form or fashion, but he would never admit that because he was just a sick bastard.
Well, and also he was older, and back in those times, mental illness, it's still a stigma, but back then it was so much worse.
Yeah.
You don't talk about that stuff at all back then.
I have no idea. Like, and I did forgive him, if you will.
Well, you have to, for yourself.
Just because it's like...
For yourself.
Well, and because I feel... The way I have looked at it is that because he was such a fucker, I am stronger. Because he used to tell me that I was going to be ignorant like my mother and that I was going to amount to nothing and I was stupid, same things. I just, for whatever reason, flipped it.
Not because of him. You did that on your own.
Yes, I did. I remember getting a letter in my math class in 7th grade from him. My teacher handed it to me saying that I was going to be ignorant like my mother and that I was going to amount to nothing.
Oh.
I mean, I was going to be an artist.
Right.
Remember? I used to... So, I don't know if older people, like our age and older, remember that there used to be an infomercial about the Art Institute of America.
Yeah, I remember that.
Test your skills. And I sent away for it. And I'm like, I'm going to test this out. And I did. And I did great. And of course, I didn't know. I was a kid. I didn't know it was a sales pitch. And they came and, told mom and dad how talented I was. And they signed me up for school and all of the stuff. I was young. And I told Larry I was going to be an artist, and he said, no, you're not. You're not good enough. You can't make any money, blah, blah, blah. And I stopped.
Wow.
I was done until I was 30-something.
Yeah,
so,
that's right. And you're such a good artist.
Thank you. It's just like, so he did win sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
But I am a highly intelligent person, and I have to credit him a little bit for that, because he was one of those sick, crazy geniuses.
Oh, yeah, he was.
So, how a lot of people with very high IQs tend to be a little
yeah.
And so I have to acknowledge that Mommy was very smart. Mommy was mostly street smart.
Yes.
Because she dropped out of school
to have
a kid.
Yeah.
So Mommy was wise.
Yes.
She was always wise.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that she wasn't intelligent, because she was. Mm-hmm. And I know that I got a big part of my intelligence from him.
Yeah.
And because of survival.
Yeah.
You know, like, I had to prove that I was smart enough. Mm-hmm. And I had to prove that I was good enough. And I had to prove all of the things.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the biggest trauma for me was the time that I had to spend with him alone after we moved out.
That makes sense.
And the fear that he instilled in me that he was going to get me.
You.
He was going to take me. I was never going to see mommy again. I was never going to see my sisters again.
He used to say that to mommy too.
Yep. So like that, and because mommy was already my best friend. Like I was an awkward kid. I was a fat kid. I started sneaking food at 5 years old, putting it under my pillow, and
gee, I wonder why you did that.
Right. And I still sometimes go in bed and eat. Like it's just a whole other thing that needs to be deprogrammed.
Right.
You know, it was, and for me, I mean, that's very common with sexual abuse is getting fat because it's safe. Yep. Nobody can hurt me.
Right.
Nobody wants the fat kid.
Right.
But then that also generates a whole other trauma of being bullied in school because you wear glasses that are 4 inches thick and are fat.
Right.
And I use the term fat as a neutral word. I don't think fat is bad. It's factual. I'm fat.
Right.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Right.
And it's taken me 45 years to decide that fat is not a bad thing. That's just what I am right now.
Right.
I have fat.
Yes.
Like it or don't. All of this to say that we can look at the question that you have asked multiple times is, why did you turn out okay? Because I have very high functioning anxiety. I deal with things completely different than you.
Yeah, you do.
Mommy died. I dove into my career and I did not stop running.
Right.
Right? Like, my brain is always on. I suffer in silence. I don't talk about things.
Right.
I process differently. And I'm functioning. You know, I grew a career for myself. I go to school. I do the things.
Yeah.
And from the outside, people who don't know me, who aren't you and Stacy,
right,
have no idea that I think I'm dying every night. And that I go through very dark periods. And for me, and I think, this is going to sound horrible, so forgive me. I think that my IQ plays a role. My high IQ. I think ahead 50 steps.
Oh, yeah.
So I know what I have to do to survive.
Right.
You were never taught survival skills.
Right.
You just had to survive the moment and not knowing. And the absolute most important thing that I learned in that class that I took about trauma is that I had a safe person and you didn't. Because we met Dad when I was 4 or 5. And you were 13. Your brain was developed. You already knew that you were not safe. You already knew that you had to always protect yourself. And you were already taught that you were dumb, not good enough, unlovable, all of the things. I had Dad to show me that I was safe.
Yeah.
He, I was out in the garage with him, learning how to do things. He taught me how to ride a bike.
Right.
That one safe person is all the difference.
Yeah.
Between you and I.
Right.
Now, Stacy's a different story because she dealt with things totally different.
Yeah.
And that's her story to tell.
That's right.
But for me, that's the key in how we get to different places.
Yeah. And,
just because I don't have the same mental illnesses that you have or that you deal with them differently doesn't make them less or more.
Right.
It's just that I had, somebody asked me, because somebody said, well, you had your mother, and she was dealing with her own trauma. Right. Like, not to say that she wasn't safe, because she never hurt me. Right. But she also went through another phase of addiction. So there was a time that she wasn't there.
Available.
Right.
Right.
And that's traumatic.
It is traumatic.
I still triggered by the smell of weed. I still am deathly afraid of taking muscle relaxers. Yeah. Because those are things that trigger me, because I can't handle that zombified thing. It brings me right back to, I can tell you exactly what it brings me back to.
To mommy passing out on her plate.
No.
What?
It brings me back to sitting on the couch watching a movie with her and Stacy. I want to say Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Okay.
And she just suddenly she was zonked. And she suddenly just got up and was trying to fold the blanket. And she couldn't fold it. Oh. And we're like, what are you doing? And she just wasn't there. Oh. So mommy was safe in that she took care of me and she loved me. And not taking away from her because she was my life. Yeah. She was dealing with her stuff. She was not that safe person for me. She wasn't
she wasn't even a safe person for herself. She wasn't.
Exactly.
So
she couldn't be your safe person. No. She couldn't be anybody's safe person. No. She needed her own safe person.
Right.
And we don't know what her life was like growing up, to be clear.
We don't.
You know, we know our grandparents.
Because she never really talked about
it. Like, we know a couple of things that we won't get into.
Right.
But it's trauma, it's cycles. And she always used to say you have to break the cycle. Yeah. So yeah, Dad saved my life. Yeah. In more ways than one, because he saved all of us. Because I do think that he played a bigger part in getting us out of that house than we know.
Oh, I'm sure. He probably helped mommy with her lessons, you know.
He probably helped her financially.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. So we don't know to what extent.
Right.
We know that he physically saved our lives because he took us in.
He did.
And despite being stalked and tortured and harassed by this sick bastard of a man, he didn't run.
He stuck it out.
Nothing ever made him waver. No. He came to therapy. He came to court appointments. Like, he was at all of the custody hearings.
He was a young guy. Like, he could have, not young, but like in his 30s.
Yeah, and he had no kids.
So he still had the whole life ahead of him.
Right. But it didn't matter.
He adored our mother.
And he adored us.
He did.
And so not only did he physically save us, emotionally and mentally, he saved me. Yeah. Because he was the father that I didn't have.
I'm so glad that you had that.
Yeah, well, and what sucks for me is that I've always known that, and I've always realized it. But I think I took that for granted until when Dad died, I still can't talk about it.
I know.
Because he was just a good man.
He was.
But yeah, so, I mean, obviously we're not going to go into every detail of the torture that we experienced with Larry. We can go on to say, for the people who ask and the people who wonder what happened to him, because I'll tell you what, when Mommy died and he was still alive, I was pissed.
Yeah, I don't blame
And then when Dad died, I think that was another thing that really bothered me when Dad died, is like, how have I lost the two people who were my parents and loved me, and this sick bastard is still alive?
I know.
Because he was.
I know.
For a few months. And so there are people who have asked what happened to this guy. He was never punished for anything that he did. He committed crimes that he framed other people for. He did all sorts of things. He went on to have another child and another wife after me, who, again, their story to tell, not getting them involved. But he did pass away in 2020.
Isn't it funny? We both lost our biological fathers in 2020.
Within months. Yeah. We lost all of our fathers in 2020.
All of them.
Because your father passed in
August 2020.
Dad passed in January. Yeah. And he passed in, I think, February or March.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. I don't even still know all the details. What I do know is that karma is very real.
Yes, it is.
And we didn't need to spend our time hating him because the universe had our back.
Took care of it.
So the man with a cold heart essentially froze to death. We don't know all the details. We do know that he apparently fell and hit his head. And I will get slack for this because there is the person who inherited his entire fortune who hates me already. But his kids got nothing. None of his kids, even the ones who weren't adopted by someone else. But apparently he fell in the snow. Nobody knew. He passed out, was found a few days later. That's all I know. That's all that matters, because that was karma.
That was karma.
Here's the thing, too, is that he didn't just torture us. He had 3 other children. He had the mothers of those children that he tortured. And God knows how many other women, because when I used to have to go visit him, he had different women every time. And what sucks, though, is that he actually did have some nice ones, and they would last a little bit. But as soon as he figured out that I liked them, they were gone. Oh. And then he also did have one that had a little girl, and they lasted a long time, which I'm not surprised by. Because
right. Well, yeah, that's his MO.
Predator. MO. That's his MO. Because if you look at, I don't want to say this, but I will say that the person that he married later also had 2 daughters that were yours and Stacy's age when he met Mommy.
That's right.
And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Because I'm not trying to get into anybody's privacy.
No.
That's, if they ever want to talk, if you guys ever want to talk to me, you know how to find me, because we're all friends. We all know each other. Yeah. Because I think he supposedly went on to marry another person.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Well, from my understanding, there's all kinds of stories about the guy. Like, people knew, like, he was a hoarder, so people knew his beautiful house because it was trash.
Right. Because, oh my God, remember one time we looked it up on Google Maps, and it was like this junkyard of a...
Yeah, you
could see all the junk.
This house was incredible. It was an incredible house. If you take out the House of Horrors,
it was a beautiful house.
Beautiful red Victorian house. I think it was close to Al Pacino's house.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, like it was like... It's Gardner, New York. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It was like old Victorian. There was like, in my bedroom, there was this weird little secret passage thingy. And it was just an incredible house.
Yeah, it was.
A house that I would love to have if I didn't,
If all the memories there
right. And then there were a few barns.
Yes.
Again, filled with...
And he always had dogs.
Always had dogs. And cats.
That he treated like shit.
Oh, yeah. He used to kick them with his steel-toed boots, too.
I know. So sad.
But he always had the same dogs. Like, even now, before he passed away, he had Samoas and Huskies.
Yeah.
Samoans.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's the kind of dogs his parents had, actually.
I don't remember them they had chickens.
Or German Shepherds, maybe.
I only remember them having chickens.
Oh, I remember them having dogs. They had 2 big dogs. Oh. And they were always dirty and greasy. I remember that.
Yeah, no. See, it's the weird things.
I know, there were weird things.
Like, because I loved Grandpa. I loved his father. I hated his mother. Like, it's weird because I was so young, but I knew. Like, it's just weird.
Well, you're a good judge of character, always.
Like, I've always, my intuition, I'm highly sensitive. Like, sound, I remember even when I was a child, loud music. We went to Billy Idol. First of all, who takes a kid that young to Billy Idol? Mommy.
We did.
I was bawling. I can't handle noise.
And then the nicest thing you ever did, well, not the nicest thing, but one of the nicest things you ever did for me was buy me Billy Idol tickets about 12 years ago. And went with me.
Yeah, even though it was the trauma.
God.
That was horrible, but it
was fun.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It's amazing the things that trigger us.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm sensitive to sound anyway, but like, and certain sounds just, I don't even know how you describe the feeling because it physically hurts. So I totally lost my train of thought. He's dead. Karma got him. The people whose lives he ruined are still here and still trying to survive.
Yeah.
I saw one of the brothers came out to visit me in 2006, shortly after Mommy died. Yeah. Because I adored him.
I know.
I adored him. And he sadly didn't get out soon enough.
No.
And turned a lot. Was very similar to him, and also fell into drugs, and because of his trauma.
Right.
The cycles, I don't know what happened to him. He clearly has mental illness.
He clearly does, because he texted me once, and I guess I didn't text him back in a timely enough manner. And he said something, and then something to the effect of, I hope you die in a ditch somewhere. Something to that effect. And I was like, okay, blocked, because I don't need that kind of shit in my life. Right. I grew up with that shit from your father. I don't need that. Right. Not your father.
Well, yeah, no, I know what you meant. Well, and that's the thing, is that so for me, like, I know why he is that way.
Yeah.
And I know I don't need to have him in my life.
Exactly.
And the other brother also because he didn't have a mother.
Yeah.
Their mother left to save her life.
Right.
wasn't able to do what mommy did and take her kids for whatever reason. Right. I don't know. It was before I was born.
It was probably because of him. He probably made something.
He beat the shit out of her with a brick.
Exactly.
So who knows? But it's the importance for people like us who have experienced, who have these ACEs, to understand that we can break the cycle, and it's hard as fuck.
It is hard as fuck.
But it's our responsibility.
It is our responsibility.
Because I've always wanted kids. None of us have children.
Same.
And I've always wanted kids. And I have polycystic ovarian syndrome. I was told I was never going to have kids. And at 21, I got pregnant, had a miscarriage. And I was like, I am having a child, like, throughout my adult life. And I was going to get a sperm donor, and I was going to do this, and I was going to do that. And until last year, I was set on having children. Because I felt I was meant to be a mother. Yeah. And in 2019, I got pregnant. Yeah. Had a miscarriage. What's funny, not funny, but when I was 16 and diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, I remember being at mommy's work because she took me to the doctor, and then I ended up going to work with her for the rest of the day. And I went to go to the bathroom, and I remember I have all of my thoughts in the bathroom. Oh. I just realized that. It started early. I came out of the bathroom and I said to mommy, I said, you know what? If I can't have children, I know it's because I'm not meant to pass on his DNA. And yet, I'm a woman and I wanted children and I was meant to be a mother and all the things. So in 2019, pregnant, another miscarriage. Clearly not meant to have children, not meant to pass on his DNA. But it wasn't until I got Stevie.
I know.
Stevie is my dog, who I got as a puppy, and I love her. And I'm a caregiver, and I'm generally a very patient person, and I'm a coach, I'm an empath, I'm all the good things. To tell you the rage that rose inside of me when Stevie wouldn't listen to me is impossible. Yeah. And I never beat my dog, and I saw how I could. Yeah. And I scared myself. Yeah. And I thought about this dog who just wouldn't listen to me when I told her to stop doing whatever she was doing, being a baby, not stopping crying.
And what if you
and what I was capable of doing to that child. And I saw in that moment how cycles of abuse continue. Because I was a different person. It wasn't even me. Right. And I remember I told you, I was like, I had never felt this kind of rage before. Right. She's not even the first puppy I've had. No. I had a puppy in 2006. Yeah. And I don't remember, but I blocked 2005, 2006 out. Right. Wow. Because mommy died in 2005. But so I was just on autopilot at that point. So I don't even know what life was like. But to say that we discount the power of the cycles that we continue throughout life is, and it's our response, and that's why it's our responsibility to put in the work to heal. Because what's happening is that those ACEs were done in 1995 to 1998, I think, and the rate of people, I think, again, we'll go into this in another episode, and I'll have all the stats, but it was like 61% of people with ACEs had over 4. And if we go almost 30 years, that has to have increased. Yeah. Sure. Because we're just continuing the patterns that we have been taught. We have to, if not for ourselves, if we have children, for our children to heal. Yeah. Because otherwise we're just creating for them what we didn't want for them. Right. We want to give our kids a better life than we had, and we don't have control sometimes. Right. Because of how we were taught, whether we know it or not. Exactly. Because I'm not a violent person. Something just snaps. I'm a freaking peace-loving hippie. I know. I've got the inclusive flags I fly in front of my house. I just, I don't care who you are. I love you. I'm a hippie. And where did this rage come from? Right. How did this happen? Right. So it is. And it's scary to feel that in yourself. Because it's like, horrifying. Holy shit. It's like, who am I? Right. I don't know who I am. Who was that person? And I do. I question, who I am inside, that I have that in me. Yeah. And I assume that everybody has the potential for that. But I always assumed that would come out when somebody was trying to hurt me, and I had to defend myself. Right. Not when my puppy was being a little shit. When she was being a puppy. Right. And she's like, because I insist when she is not listening to me, she's looking at me like, ha ha. She's a freaking dog, right. Again, I do not abuse my dog. I love my dog. And I acknowledge that I have this potential in me to be an abusive person. Yeah. So at that point, at 44 years old, I figured out that for sure I'm not meant to be a mother. Right. And it sucks. But I mean, that's my responsibility, is to heal myself for future generations. Right. And to show people how my experience is so they can learn from them and help themselves and help people that they love. Exactly. So trauma looks like different things for different people. Mm-hmm. And even if there are people that grew up in the same house, because again, there were 3 of us in that house and we all ended up as 3 very different people. So don't ever think that your trauma wasn't trauma. And don't ever assume that because someone hasn't lived through what you have, that their trauma isn't real. That's right. I mean, you can't. And I feel like it's a bad time for this just because the term trauma is often overused. Mm-hmm. And not that it's overused. Too many people are experiencing trauma. Right. And it's becoming diluted. Yeah. And people are taking it less seriously. Right. We have to understand that the effects of prolonged childhood trauma, all trauma, specifically I'm talking because this is my experience of prolonged childhood trauma, the effects that it has on a person in adulthood are not just being sensitive or being triggered. Right. It can cause mental illness. It does cause cycles to repeat. It does cause physical illness. Yep. It causes anxiety. It causes depression. It causes all of the things. Mm-hmm. So when you judge a person based on their reaction to you, like if somebody would have sat here and saw the rage in me with Stevie, they'd be like, who is that? Fucking crazy. Like, who is that? Yeah. Because that's not you. Right. Or, man, she's just a bitch. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget. This is the silliest thing that I have to say today, which is pretty good. I went to Starbucks one morning on my way to work. Mm-hmm. And I'm walking out. And I get lost in my head. Mm-hmm. And I am also a very polite person. I hold doors for people. Well, I was in my head, didn't know there was someone behind me, and I didn't hold the door. Oh. And he comes out, and he's like, hey, thanks, like all sarcastically. I started bawling. Oh, I remember this story. I cried for hours because I am a polite person, and I would never close the door in someone's face, ever. Right. And it's like, why would you just assume that I'm this rude person? You don't know what was going on in my head. Right. And because clearly there was something going on in my head at the time that I just wasn't paying attention. Right. It's really easy for us these days to, and especially get it on video about somebody losing their mind. Right. But do you really have any idea what's going on with them? Like, stop making fun of crazy people. Yeah. Like, she's crazy. This person went batshit crazy. Like, stop with that. Yeah. Because that's not helping us. And stop throwing around terms like batshit crazy. Yes. Yes. I'm taking ownership of the word crazy anymore. Like just like fat, I am fat and I am crazy. Oh, I always say I'm crazy. Yeah. But I never call someone else crazy. No. Because I know that there's a negative connotation. Yeah. On it. For me, personally, my crazy, I own it because I earned it. Exactly. With my experiences, I earned my crazy. That's right. And if you want to make it a bad thing, that's not my problem. That's on you. Yeah. Yep. But stop with the TV shows and all the social media, because everything anymore is everywhere. Yeah. That this person is crazy and making it a negative thing. Right. Because there are people who already feel crazy enough and beat themselves up about it, and they have no control over it. Yeah, absolutely. So I think we'll leave it at that. Another rant on our part. We're getting in our groove here of this podcast. We'll talk more about all kinds of things in a couple weeks. So make sure to stay tuned. And remember to be kind to others and to yourself. Love our podcast? Don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us at My Sister's Keeper Mental Health on Instagram and on Facebook. Also, please remember that we are not licensed mental health professionals, and if you are in crisis, please dial or text 988.